everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series. And today I'm going to be taking a look at a one-off album that came out in 1988 from a one-and-done lineup featuring ELP members keyboardist Keith Emerson, drummer Carl Palmer, and American multi-instrumentalist and singer Robert Berry. And this is their only studio recording that they put out as a band, and this is Free to the Power of Free. So during the 1980s, there had been numerous attempts to try and get ELP back together, and as we all know already, Carl Palmer did not rejoin Keith Emerson and Greg Lake as he was still contracted to Asia, and they were in the middle of recording their third studio album, Astra. So enter powerhouse drummer Cozy Powell as Carl Palmer's replacement, and the band of Keith Emerson, Greg Lake, and Cozy Powell would record their only studio album, self-titled Emerson, Lake, and Powell, and that lineup disbanded after one tour. So there had been another attempt to try and get ELP back together, and Greg Lake walked out and enter his replacement, super talented American multi-instrumentalist and singer Robert Berry, and the band of Emerson, Palmer, and Berry would dub themselves as Free. Now, Robert Berry, super talented, highly versatile musician and a great composer and an unbelievable singer as well, with a very impressive pedigree and background. He's played and collaborated with Hush, Alliance, December People, and Gus Anos, among others. Robert Berry is the whole package and a very different kind of singer to Greg Lake. Greg Lake, much more soulful and much more of a traditional prog rock singer. Robert Berry is very much in the AOR style of singing, very more leaning towards pop, but at the same time, an amazing talent. And he is the real difference maker in this band, and he has a huge presence on this album. Keith Emerson and Carl Palmer, what more can you say? Two true progressive rock legends. And I thought this band, although very short lived, I thought they worked very well together. Keith Emerson, I would say, he does have a presence on this album, but he takes more of a back seat. I mean, he's still all over this album. You can still hear him a lot, but I kind of look at Free as more of Robert Berry's thing. And that's not taking anything away from two legends in Carl Palmer and Keith Emerson, but I just feel that this is much more of Robert Berry's show, but doesn't take away from the fact that there's some tremendous music and it's a lot more AOR driven. There's still progressive elements in there, and there's still some little rumblings of that ELP spirit that we all know and love. But I thought these guys together were an incredible three piece. You know, Keith Emerson's keyboard playing, much more in line with the typical sounds of the 80s, but still very much Keith Emerson. Carl Palmer's drumming, a little bit more electronic driven, but still very much Carl Palmer and still hard hitting. As I said, Cozy Powell was much more aggressive and more harder hitting in his drumming. Carl Palmer, as I said, a bit more harder hitting, but a much more restrained and laid back approach to his playing, but still very much the man that we all know and love. And Robert Berry, just what more can you say about the guy? He is super talented, highly versatile. He plays guitars, keyboards, bass, and he sings. He's the whole package, as I said. And as I said, this album is a little bit different to Emerson, Lake, and Powell. It sounds similar to Asia in some ways, but just different. And sometimes different is good. And I feel this album kind of goes under the radar when you're talking about progressive rock albums in the 1980s. But I thought this was a great album. I've listened to this numerous times, and there's some great stuff there. And as I said, Robert Berry's just an incredible singer, and he's got a bit more of a quirkier voice than Greg Lake, but man, can this guy really sing? And he can play as well. So let's have a look, shall we? This picture's kind of iconic for me. I remember this on my dad's vinyl. And when I think of Free, when I think of Keith Emerson, Carl Palmer, and Robert Berry, this is the first picture that comes to mind. You know, the three of them standing there wearing long trench coats. And this picture, with the two female backing singers in the background, just kind of looks like an 80s mafia movie. They're all standing outside, looking at the sunset, and looking like they're ready to pull off their next job. And I think it's a really cool picture. And you know, you got Carl Palmer there with his shades and his little mullet going on. It's just very typical 80s, but at the same time, a very cool picture because when I look at this picture, I don't think of these guys as a band. It just looks like a mob gang, like ready to pull off their next heist. And I think it's just absolutely cool. And you know, you're forgetting that they may look like three ordinary guys from the 80s. These are three super talented musicians, and it's a really good picture. So we've got the lyrics and credits and track listing, and we got some more lyrics as well. And we got the production notes, and we got a picture of the guys. So most of the music is written and composed by Emerson, Palmer, and Berry. There are a couple of tracks written by Robert Berry himself. There is also one track written by Schifrin and Marlette, and we've got a cover version which was written and composed by Clark, McQueen, and Crosby. And there's a couple of Emerson compositions as well. And there's also one track that's written and composed by Emerson and Palmer. Now, the interesting thing is in ELP, Keith Emerson and Greg Lake, they did most of the material. Keith Emerson did the music and Greg Lake did the lyrics. And I think Carl Palmer did contribute a bit, but it was mostly Emerson and Lake. Now, with Free, Carl Palmer has quite a big hand in the composing. I mean, most of the compositions is predominantly all Robert Berry, but Emerson and Palmer, you know, they give their contributions as well. But I'm quite amazed that you know Carl Palmer actually composed quite a bit of this album because I've never really known Carl Palmer to be a composer. I mean, he is a great songwriter in his own right, but I've always known Carl Palmer as more of a drummer than a composer. He plays for the music and he always lets the others, whichever band he's playing in, he always lets them do all the songwriting. He just plays it. So it's really nice to see that, you know, Carl Palmer having a bit of creative input for an album. And, you know, he plays a big part on this album. His drumming is all over this album. The keyboard playing of Emerson is all over this album. And of course, Robert Berry, he has a massive presence, as I said already. And as I said, it's a very AOR-ish album, you know, kind of similar to what Asia did. So it's kind of like a mixture of progressive rock meets AOR with some pop elements in there as well. So tracks we got here are Talking About, Lover to Lover, Chains, Desda La Vida, which is like in three parts. So we got La Vista, Frontiera, Sangre de Toro, and then we got 8 Miles High, Runaway, You Do or You Don't, and On My Way Home. But you know, this album doesn't really get talked about that much. It doesn't really get a lot of love, but I personally think this was a fantastic album. It is a shame that this band didn't stay together for a little bit longer. I would have liked to have seen maybe another studio album, perhaps, because I think there was a bit more to give, I think, in terms of the music. I thought these guys really worked well together, and you know, Keith Emerson and Robert Berry, they matched up very well. Carl Palmer, of course, he matches up well with anyone you put him in front of him. He's a great drummer, one of the greatest prog drummers in the world. And it's a fantastic album. I really liked it a lot. It's actually one of my favorites, from any of the progressive rock albums that have come out over the years. I really like this album a lot, and it's one of my favorites from the 80s. I just think it's a fantastic album, in my opinion. So the standout tracks for me are Talking About, Lover to Lover, Chains, and 8 Miles High and Runaway. And my all-time favorite track, and in my opinion, the best one of the entire Free album, is Desde La Vida, which to me really captures the spirit and iconic sound of ELP. And it sounds like it could have easily have been an ELP track. It's got all of the hallmarks that, as we all know, ELP for. And Robert Berry really shines the brightest, both musically and vocally. Emerson's keyboard and piano work is all over this album, and Carl Palmer, he's just an absolute monster on the drum kit, and he delivers some real hard hitting drumming on this track. But I think the whole album, from top to bottom, is amazing. It is a shame that Free didn't last longer. I would have liked to have seen what they could have come up with next. It would have been cool to see a follow up to The Power of Free. I think it would have been very interesting. And all due respect to Emerson and Palmer, who sound amazing as always. As I said, I think Robert Berry shines the brightest, both vocally and musically. He's just a super monster talent who can do it all, and very highly versatile as well. So Free would disband. ELP would eventually get back together in the 1990s and record 2 studio albums and a couple of live albums before going their separate ways. And then they would get back together for a one off special show at 2010's High Voltage. And then they would disband and go their separate ways for good. And as we all know, we lost Keith Emerson in 2016 after he unfortunately committed suicide. Now, there was stories I heard about Free possibly getting back together. I know Robert Berry expressed interest in working with Keith Emerson again. He had been meeting up with Carl Palmer, and Carl Palmer was very much open to the idea of doing more Free stuff. But unfortunately, with Keith Emerson's passing and the way he passed away, that reunion never became a reality. But Robert Berry, to his credit, still plays the music of Free to this day, and he has an incredible band he calls 3.2. Fantastic band with some unbelievable musicians, and Carl Palmer is touring with his own band called the ELP Legacy, where he plays the music of Emerson, Lake and Palmer with two great young musicians. So it's good to see that these guys are still active, but I would have liked to have seen a Free reunion. I think that would have been incredible. But hey ho, some things are just not meant to be. So there you have it. Free to the Power of Free. A fantastic album from a one and done band. Such a shame we didn't get a follow up, but I really enjoyed this album a lot. I think it's a great sounding album, a great fun listen with some outstanding tracks and some great playing from Emerson and Palmer and some great singing from Robert Berry. I would have loved to have seen him in Asia. I think he would have been incredible with those guys because, in some ways, I kind of look at him as similar to John Wetton and Greg Lake in terms of being multi talented, highly versatile, an incredible singer and a composer, and just the whole all round package. So I would have loved to have seen what Robert Berry would have been like in Asia. I think he would have been a great fit for those guys, but we'll never know really. So there you have it. Free to the Power of Free. A fantastic and very underrated album from the 1980s. Brilliant stuff. So that's going to be it from me. I am going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite track from To the Power of Free? Is it Talking About, Lover to Lover, Chains, Desde La Vida, 8 Miles High, Runaway, You Do or You Don't, or On My Way Home? Or did you enjoy the whole album from start to finish? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite tracks. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. and I will see all of you next for another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.